Okay, so once the sales team have finished their process, we go into clients and we start our process ourselves. But obviously we have a handover with the sales team, so we know what the client's looking for initially. But we go through what we call process mapping, which is a deep investigation of how they use processes in their company, whether they want to change processes, whether they want to keep processes the same. And at the end of that process mapping, we then set up a configuration of their site, and we configure their site to what they've said of how they want their processes to run. Now, once we've configured their site, that's when we would like to bring in their data. And that data can either be from Excel sheets or it can be brought in from other systems. But we load it into our system through SQL, but all they need to do is put it on Excel sheets and then we can upload it. So it's quite a straightforward process for us. For them, obviously, it's a little bit more complicated because they have to cleanse their data and look through their data. But once we've uploaded it into the system, they've then got all their data in the system from their last 5 years, 10 years, however long they decide they want their data. And then they can go through it and test the system, look through the system and see if it's working in the way they'd like it to. At that point, once we've got the system set up, configured, we've done the process mapping. So at the point they've migrated their data in, they've done the testing on the system, we look to train the company. So once we go in to train the company, that can either be individual training or it can be training to a team. I've trained 400 people at one time, I've trained one person. It doesn't matter how many people there are, especially if we do it over teams, because again, if there's 400 people, it doesn't matter whether it's 400 people or one person. And we ask questions and we make sure that everyone knows how the system's been set up, how it's working and how their processes fit into their new system. And at that point, once they're up and happy and running and using the system effectively, that's when we'd hand it to our customer experience team. Once we get the client from sales, we go into the client and we do process mapping. Once we've done the process mapping, which works out all their processes and how they're going to fit into Rapport3, we then configure their system based on that as process mapping discussions. We then migrate in all their data. Once we've got their data in the system, they go through and test the system and make sure the system's working how they would like it to work. We go through, we train our clients. Sometimes we train individually, sometimes we train as a team, but once they're fully trained and everyone understands the system, then they set a go live date of when everyone goes live and starts inputting timesheets into the site. And at that point, we stay with them for another couple of months to make sure that everything's running smoothly before we hand them over to our customer experience team. Previously, from working at Cubic, I did a diploma in mechanical and electrical engineering, so building services engineering, and I've done a degree in architecture. I've worked for several large architectural practices across London and some in Australia as well. And all that experience of setting up projects and running projects as a project manager and doing project finance has helped me set up Rapport. So when I go into a client, I know, because I've worked from their side, what they want, how they want the system set up. I know all the aspects of the system and how that may help them in how they work. And I can see, I understand how work stages work, I understand how related projects work, for example. So I can always offer them very good advice about whether or not they should go down a certain road within Rapport or not, or whether there'd be a better option for them. I've worked with lots of sub-consultants over the years. I've worked with Middle Eastern projects where I've had to do with a lot of sort of like pro formas, dealing with the Middle Eastern clients, etc. I know how to set up how projects in Rapport based on what clients need, and I think I've got very good options on how they can set up the system and how they'd like to use the system and how they'd like to use things like sub-consultants within the system and run their expenses in the system, and also how to do fee invoices through the system, etc. Yes, so at the point where a client comes to us, obviously they haven't got their system set up and configured yet. So we obviously set up their system, configure their system, move in all their data into the system. And at the point after they go live, they've been with us a couple of months after go live, we make sure that everything's running smoothly. At that point, I book an internal meeting with our customer experience team and our head of support, and I go through the process that client has been through with me. So we have a very in-depth meeting about all the configurations they've got, maybe they've had some developments onto the site that are very specific to them, how their system works, and we sit there and we talk about every single option of what they've done with their system. Now, once the customer experience and support team take over from me, what they'll do is they will make sure they follow up every month, week, depending on what the client needs, and make sure that they have everything they need, and if they need any further support or further development or further training, they will organise all that for them. Yes, so I lived and worked in Australia for 7 years, quite a few years ago now, but I also qualified as an architect originally in Australia. So I have a very good understanding of the Australian market, and I know they work slightly differently from the UK market, and they do need some developments to their sites. So we've got a few Australian clients on board now, and we've learnt a lot from them as well of what they need and what they would require going forward. But going more into Australia, we understand all the needs of the Australian clients, and we're starting to get a good understanding of how their system has to be set up and configured slightly differently than how a UK system would be set up and configured.